Hey y'all, welcome back to the show. You know who it is. It's your boy Jay Henein, and I'm back with another episode of How to Kill a Sacred Cow. Tonight on the podcast, we have the very talented Maryam Henein. She is an investigative journalist of over 25 years and has now produced 2 documentary films, one of which is an award-winning, Oscar-nominated documentary that the Huffington Post named one of the 12 most mind-blowing movies you can stream on Netflix. Now, it is no longer on Netflix. Don't look, I've tried. And it was once available on Amazon Prime for purchase, however, is no longer. The only place I was able to find The Vanishing of the Bees was on Plex. You can watch it right now for free, so very lucky that it is still available, and at least somewhere. And the documentary of which is the subject of tonight's discussion is George Floyd, The Real Timeline. It is actually going to have a name change because the family has legally pressured her to take George Floyd out of the name of the documentary and very likely out of the name of the book that she has also produced for this documentary, of which will be released around the same time as the documentary, if all things go well. I know how difficult it is to create content. I think writing a book is one of the toughest things that you can do as far as content creation. So I will put all of the links to her websites in the show notes, of course, but there is one more thing that I'm going to put in the show notes, and that is her Give, Send, Go. She needs help raising funds to recoup some of the money that she spent in making this documentary. She piled up at least $10,000 in fees for filing the FOIA requests for this documentary. It's all source material. It's all body cam footage, security cam footage that she had to obtain from the government. And at the very least, we should support this woman in this incredible documentary by at least helping her recoup her legal fees for filing all those FOIA requests. I say it all the time, like I can't believe how studious and industrious people are. I am lazy as far as that stuff goes, and I am glad people out there exist to do that kind of work. Now, before we move on with the interview, I would like to point everybody to howtokillasacredcow.com. This is where I populate everything that I do. There are blog posts that go along with each page, so you get the video on each one, along with a blog post with all the links of everything that is important about the producer and the content creator, whoever I happen to be working with. So, before we wrap this up, I am going to show you guys the trailer for the documentary, and then I'll be right back.
Freedom of speech, folks. Don't touch me. I got this all on camera. Watch out. Don't touch me.
Third precinct is up in flames.
We begin with breaking news in South Minneapolis.
Caught on tape, a black man pinned to the ground, later dying after a white officer kneeled on his neck.
It started with a report of a forgery in progress and ended with Floyd's death.
The situation has become volatile at the 3rd Police Precinct tonight.
As police officers and protesters clash over a man's death.
Miles from Minneapolis, anger, frustration pouring into the streets of America.
I can't breathe!
It all stems from this video.
What we saw was horrific. He can be heard on the video saying, "I can't breathe."
Police officers involved have all been terminated.
It's in your hands.
You can ask Mr. Adams about me. Man, I'm scared as fuck, man. You must start breathing. It's gonna go off on me. I can't choke. I can't breathe.
That's my ex. He got a thing going on. I'm telling you about the police. He have problems.
Not move, not one time, bro.
He's off track right now.
But yeah, bro, go back in the store.
What happened to him?
Fucked up. All right.
They fucked him up.
Fucked up. He took your ID? Yeah. How you doing?
So what happened? More drama at Cup Foods?
Cup Foods, yeah. It was just a forgery report. The person that had given him a fake bill, we went over there and...
What's the matter?
Yeah.
And that is the trailer for the documentary, of which is the subject of tonight's discussion. Now, without any further ado, give it up for Maryam Henein. All right, everybody, thanks for joining me once again, How to Kill a Sacred Cow. I have with me today a very special guest. Her name is Maryam Henein. Maryam, say hi to the people.
Howdy, peoples. Happy to be here.
This was a very beautiful kind of synchronized universe kind of a thing. Someone canceled on me for an interview, and Steve slid right into my DMs and said, "Hey, I got someone for you." And I said, "Fine, can she go tomorrow?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Who is it?" And he says, "Maryam Henein." And I was like, "Dude, yes, absolutely." Oh, actually, I touched something. I said I wasn't going to touch anything. So she is the creator of the new documentary. Isn't even out yet. I have been waiting for this one for what feels like forever. It is George Floyd, The Real Timeline. So Maryam, why don't you let my listeners know how you came to make this? Actually, you know what? I do this all the time. Let's back up.
Yes.
How did you get into content creation? Let everybody know about your first documentary and how you got into this whole realm.
Well, I'm an actual real journalist. I'm not a prostitute or a parrot, a media whore. And I hail from Montreal, Canada. I was living in Chinafornia for 23 years in LA. And then I was in San Francisco with Zach Vorhies. But my first film is called Vanishing of the Bees. And back when I made that, Ellen Page was still a woman. She's the narrator of the movie. And now she's lobbed off her boobies and, and a boy. So, so my first film was Vanishing of the Bees. I didn't think that I would make another documentary. It's very taxing and time intensive. But here I am I've just concluded making this, the timeline. I had to remove the name George Floyd because I just got threatened by an attorney last week. I called for something completely different. I called the estate of George Floyd because in my investigations, this film goes with a book that has not wrapped yet, and that I've been working for a year and a half, and I've been working on this George Floyd psyop since day one. I've been covering the event and trying to figure out what on earth really happened that day. So the movie is really supposed to illustrate the timeline. I, for myself, wanted to see what happens at 7:30 to 9:30 when he's pronounced dead at 9:25. And therefore, I put all the footage that I purchased from the government and so that I can see for myself. And so the book is going to be coming out in the spring of 2023. So I called the estate and asked about a document. I found a disallowance claim against someone named Tanner Floyd, who claimed to be the biological father of George Floyd. And I called over 3 months the estate with no response. And so last week I called again And this time I said that I was commissioned to write a book and that I worked for MSNBC, because I did start off my career in Burbank working at MSNBC and was part of the mainstream. So it was kind of like, I'm one of you, call me back. And sure enough, the next day I got a call back and she left a message saying it would be in your best interest not to move forward. So I said, are you saying that in the United States of America, I'm not allowed to write a book on a public figure called George Floyd? And she said, yes. And I'm like, really? Let me record that. And she said, I don't give you permission to record. And I said, well, let me just get a pen. And I was literally coming into my office to grab a pen, and she hung up on me. So I had spoken to an Asian gentleman who did apply for the trademark George Floyd, like literally 2 weeks after George was determined to be dead. And then I did call him several months ago, and he told me, no, it's inactive. I'm not using it. He was actually in Florida, where I now live. And so then I went again to look at the trademark, and I found that the estate, this well-to-do firm, had filed 12 trademarks on George, like everything under the fucking sun, making him a veritable George Floyd theme park, like from keychains to seminars, you name it, they've trademarked it. And so I removed all this to say that I removed the name George Floyd, and the movie's called The Real Timeline. And I'm very grateful for my Movies Plus for distributing this film. I had no problems garnering the interest of, oh, Maryam, yeah, you're the B lady. My film was a success. It was shown around the world, won many awards. And then when they find out the topic on DocuLink, for instance, which is a close-knit mail list, they were voting to get me off of it as a racist.
Okay, so I have many, many questions because so one of the things I'm very passionate about is bees and trees, because without the bees and the trees, you got nothing.
Right.
And I feel a little bit embarrassed. Obviously, when I checked out your bio and your website, I discovered that you had done a documentary on bees, but then I just wish I had more hours between when we agreed to do this and now, so that I could have watched both documentaries. But I was very happy to watch the George Floyd documentary. I had been itching to see that for quite a while now, and it's difficult because I would love to get into your time at MSNBC. I would love to get into the bees, but this life only gives you this much time,
right.
And so
time is collapsing.
One thing I wanted to say about the documentary, it's incredibly well done, and what I liked about it the most was that it is very heavy on footage the day of, security cameras, body cam footage, and you even interviewed the fellow that was with George Floyd, correct?
Yes, I've interviewed many people, but Maurice is the only one that makes it in the film. And I just got a call from him in the Slammer yesterday, and I've become, dare I say, friends or friendly. And I definitely care about him, and that might be judged, or you might wonder why.
No, strangely, actually, he seemed, one, like a sympathetic figure, and two, I would chill with the dude. He seemed fucking cool. So
it is fucking cool.
Oh yeah, we would have some good times, especially if his profession is as advertised. So that's what I'm saying is that it's unlike how someone else would approach the documentary. It would be maybe more interview heavy. This is very primary source heavy. And how much did you have to spend to get all that footage?
Upwards of $10,000, all on my dime. And when you're a targeted individual like myself, I'm not making 40K as a content influencer peddling collagen. So it's, the truth is the government has come after me, and I've been even, persecuted by the FTA, DOJ, FTC as part of Operation Quack Hack, because my main focus as not only a journalist, but a functional medicine coach and consultant has been medical freedom, has been functional medicine and biohacking. And I've had to take a U-turn to focus on. But you're right. It's not a typical documentary. It's the timeline. And given, this is ushering a Minority Report AI kind of police state in the future. And they banked on this footage. I thought to put it together because clearly the defense didn't do a good job at giving Derek a fair trial. And that's, you're able to discern, not throw out the baby with the bathwater. That's different than my opinions or whether I think that Derek should have laid off once George was clearly passed out. Nonetheless, he did not get a fair trial. And I believe in the Constitution and our rights under that.
Yeah, we could talk about Derek for a little bit. And I'm going to mention somebody that you may not like for several reasons. One, because she may be controlled opposition, and also she kind of beat you to the punch, only because she had a lot more.
She kind of.
Well,
I
you
brought
can.
my, yeah.
You can do that when you have more money. You can do that when you can just throw however much money you want. And but one thing I did actually like about Candace Owens' documentary was the way that she covered Derek Chauvin, because that was a side of him that I had never even considered, that maybe this guy wasn't some murderous, crazy son of a bitch. Maybe, and the way that she had depicted him in the movie, and again, I don't trust anything that I see just because I saw it. But the interviews that she conducted painted him as very sympathetic.
She spoke to Plager. I mean, all of those officers and lieutenants, sergeants, and colleagues I reached out to as well, and either was turned down or have for my book. So yes, I appreciate that she tracked down the money, and again, you can discern and not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Someone brought my trailer a year plus ago to Candace, and I was trying to get a press pass for an event, and then next thing I know, oh, now you're making a documentary. Okay. And so there's some elements in the beginning that I feel that she ripped from my idea, which of course anyone could duplicate this. What do I have is context like no other. And I'll challenge anyone. And I say that I know more about this case than anyone on this planet, given my thousands of hours of research, FOIA documents that again are mostly in the book. And this was just to illustrate what happened. And sure enough, I did glean a lot of information from that. So yeah, she made a good film. I would think she has the Daily Wire, right, to back her up and give her the budget and access. For instance, spoke to Derek's appeal lawyer yesterday, and I sent him the movie. And I have written to Derek in jail, and I've tried to speak to Carolyn Paulenti, the mama of Derek, Michael Chauvin. So when people don't get too close to me as a real journalist, I suss out that when they're not 100% real. So someone could say, oh, this is all fake, but it has real repercussions on all of us. The bills that went into motion and the infrastructure of policing that is changing and has changed because of George is very real. And the fact that he didn't, none of these officers got a fair trial, that's also very real. And I did try to interview Earl Grey and Thomas Plunkett and Robert Pauley, all the and Eric Nelson, all the attorneys that were representing the officers, and now this current attorney for the appeal. The thing is that once the movie will release on MLK, on Martin Luther King Day, January 16th, and then 2 days later, there is the trial of the oral appeal arguments of Derek Chauvin. But will anyone tune in? Did you know that?
No. No, I thought he was in the slammer forever. And obviously he didn't get a fair trial. But with situations like this, I mean, so I remember the day it happened. I was at work. I'm like walking past the TV, and I see Derek Chauvin on the neck of George Floyd. And I was kind of like, all right, well, what's going on here? Because police kill people every day. Yeah. This is nothing out of the ordinary. This is a little egregious, the way that it was presented. But I was just like, all right, I think I see where this is going. And I try to keep an open mind, but, you know, I'm a conspiracy theorist. You know what I'm saying? So immediately I was like, all right, well, this is, let's get ready for whatever this is going to turn into. And sure and I will at least, I will say this much. However, it has affected policing since this has gone down. I've gotten pulled over a lot less, and I can live with that. So I've kind of flip-flopped between this being either like something that was exploited by the media at a very time in a perfect time for something like this to turn into what it turned into a full kind of full psyop, full military intelligence psyop, to somewhere maybe in between, right? Like, right. Maybe these people were involved in some type of operation previously, and we know patsies, they get made out of low-level intelligence officers all the time, or intelligence operatives, not officers. The officers are the ones that you don't see them on CNN, MSNBC. So I mean, I was already primed to see your documentary and to kind of I'm already in that camp, but I try not to, you know, I try to be open about this stuff because I know I've been wrong in the past, you know, and I've gone too far with some stuff, but there is certainly some elements of this that are very strange. That being the fact that Derek Chauvin and George Floyd worked together at a nightclub. Weird. The fact that have you seen this guy that claims to be George Floyd's lawyer on social media, and that he claims that George Floyd is an entire
Timothy Japhet. He's a whole chapter in my book.
Okay, yes.
Under every crevice, rock. So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, I was nearing the end there. No, it's just so you've got all these different elements that pull you in a bunch of different directions, which is perfect if it's a full-fledged a psyop, because you want to get pulled in 15 different directions so that you're wasting time on 14 of them. And so where do you fall in this? Because I felt like you pulled back a little bit on the documentary. You didn't put a lot of your what you really think happened. You kind of let the evidence speak for itself, yes, which is definitely commendable. But you know, lay it all out there. What do you think happened?
Well, my book is called George Floyd, a multi-layered psyop examined. And I say that if George Floyd was a stone, he would be killing a lot more than two birds. And I consciously bring the receipts to everything I say. And in my book, only at the end do I venture, I feel like I've earned it after this forensic investigation, to give my 2 cents, so to speak. So on one end of the spectrum is someone who would think that this was co-opted after the fact, that it just happened to land on Benjamin Crump's desk and he jumped on it, and that there's no shortage of real cases of police brutality and racism. Now, on the other end is someone, let's say my amazing editor, not to speak for him, but Sean Hibbler, that would think it's all fake. And I am somewhere in between. Because of the repetitive I can't breathe that came in lockstep with the mask mandates literally the next day, I do not feel that this is just a coincidence. Also, when you look at the beginnings of the global brainwashing think tank Tavistock, and you look at how Tavistock began, you will see some players. Like, for instance, one of the instrumental beginnings initiators of Tavistock is named Lloyd George. And
is it David Lloyd George? You're talking about the Prime Minister?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, it is. And so also in this PSYOP, you learn that, there's body-worn camera footage that Keith Ellison and others consciously sat on and claimed that releasing it would be trying the case in the media. What a joke. The prosecution stated that. However, so then it got leaked. It dropped into the lap of the Daily Mail. I was in Costa Rica when this happened, and in August, that's 4 months later, I look at the footage, the body-worn footage, and I'm aghast because which adult would behave this way? I certainly, as a brown chick, couldn't get away with that. However, George Floyd did or tried to. So I'm like, I'm going to reach out to the Daily Mail writer. Oh, it's someone that I used to leak vapid information in my other life when I lived in Hollywood and used to drip gossip to People magazine and In Touch. And it just so happened to be the byline of the same editor. So I reached out to him. And Daily Mail was started by Lord Northcliffe, who was buddy with Rothschild, and who was integral in beginning Tavistock. So when you look at the multi-levels, the multi-layers of this, also, I would say that, so I don't believe that it's just a coincidence, personally. And we find out, for instance, that in 2019, George was arrested and did eerily similar behavior. Like, so it could be his shtick. It's his shtick when he gets arrested. He's a seasoned career criminal, and this is what he does, sure. But what isn't told, and again, this is in my book, is that it was a sting operation. And when Scott Crichton, who's now retired, who's the cop, one of the cops, pulls George over, he was brought in by Steve Schletzer and Keith Ellison, prosecutors, to be on the prosecution. And so he's interviewed and like, what's going on? Tell us about this event. And he says that it was a sting operation and that it was a narcotics stop. And so Schletzer goes, you mean a traffic stop? And he's like, no, I mean a narcotics stop. Oh, you mean a traffic stop? So when they realized that Crichton wasn't going to lie, they dismissed him, and then he went to the defense. So he was testifying on the behalf of Derek. So to answer your question, I mean, there's so much that is not in the movie, like some hush money that I found that I have to keep safe, to a baby mama that they kept out of the press. And it's dated 24 days before George loses his life. So what were they doing? And meanwhile, now there's only one heir, and that's Gianna Pink Floyd, because of course her name is Pink Floyd. So when you go back and you see all these coincidences, it's just too much. It's too much to think that it's just chance, happenstance.
Yeah, I always say if it ends up on the news, it's not chance,
Right.
It's there because there's billions of things going on every single day, but you only see 5 things, So that usually points out an agenda.
Right.
And the kind of like my take on it was probably that these guys were involved in some type of cartel operation.
Right. Yeah, I haven't got into that yet.
Yeah, something to do with that restaurant, something to do with it because that restaurant shuts down, just shortly after.
She sells the building in January 2020, months before.
Oh, it was before. Okay.
This happens. She sells the Oddfellows 1909 building that, and the person who purchased it got their money. Interestingly, the building itself is almost like $1.5 million, but the land is only $200,000. So yes, in reality, if this is a money laundering Sinaloa cartel, fake fentanyl operation, and you have to wonder why there is no mention of where the fake money comes from, and there's no mention of the fake fentanyl, which is the #1 killer in America, even surpassing these bloated bullshit case-demic numbers. And now we do really have excess deaths because of the jab, but that's, people are scratching their heads to what's going on. But so yeah, there's foul play, and they're not going to talk about the complicity of the government. And during this, writing the book, I thought to myself, it seems like a foolish thought. I wonder if in reality the government knows about the cartels, that it's all show, right? So I'm doing research, and this book wasn't even translated into English yet, called The Mexican Cartel Doesn't Exist. And he the author is one of the many. I've interviewed a DEA investigator that was pretending to be part of the cartel and working with informants who don't even know that they're informants. And that's how I came across Maurice. I suspected that he was an informant, and after applying for a FOIA, I was right for a hot minute. And there's also suspicions that George was an informant. And so, yeah, I will only be able to lay it all out. And so there's so much more I could have put in this film, but it's really focusing on the timeline and at least creating a foundation where we can have a more serious conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we don't have to spoil it for the audience, but what did you think of the moment with Tu Thao?
I'm sorry. Where he motions the crowd over. Yes. So that, I am a student of psyops. So that's exactly what that looks like. I'm very glad you caught that. And it's something that made me think of everything that you were just talking about. I'm glad people like you exist, because I'm too lazy for that shit. I would never run around putting in FOIA requests and stuff like that, because you see, and as a lazy person like me, the way we exist is we get to exist, and then we get to watch hardworking people do their thing, and then you go, yeah. I knew I was right. I'm glad that she did it though, and so this is how intelligence organizations get their black budget. Now, this is something that goes back, you could, British East India Company, the opium wars with Great Britain and China. This is how empires either get into an area and take control of it, especially if it's a foreign place. But also, this is how they fund stuff that they can't get their own gentry, barons, and knights to fund. And so there's a very interesting, I don't want to detour too much, so I'll try to give you the shortest version that I can come up with. What happened after World War II, we all know about Operation Paperclip. There's this fellow, I'm going to blank on his name, Dan Sheehan. He's a constitutional lawyer. And he mounted the defense for Danny Ellsberg for the Pentagon Papers when when the New York Times was being sued by the government to not release the Pentagon Papers. he, in between then and now, he's a teacher now, and working on CE5 with that fellow Green, Close Encounters of the Fifth, whatever. He came into contact with somebody that was working for the CIA, that was going to be head of the field office in Mexico, and part of his they had to clear him. So he went down to meet the top brass in Mexico, in the CIA field office down there. Well, he gets down there and he gets brought to this village that looks exactly like Bavaria, is the way that he described it.
Wow.
And he lands.
Bavaria in Mexico?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's one of these in Mexico, but there's also, of course, Argentina. You'll see where the story's going. So he gets down there and he meets with the top brass of the Mexican CIA field office, and it turns out he gets in there and there is there's a swastika emblazoned on the table, and there's a Nazi flag hanging up behind them. These are the people that were brought over from Paperclip that worked in the secret the stormtroopers, the SS.
Yeah.
In the Nazis, and what they do is they run all of the drug organizations down there in Central South America so that the CIA can get its black budget. And then, of course, it spills over into America in a million different ways. But this is what I wanted to bring it up here to this part of the story, is that this is what the Sinaloa cartel is. This is a CIA operation. It's not just a front. Right. It is a fucking field office of the CIA in Mexico. Well, and they learned this from Vietnam. This is how they funded the CIA in the 60s and 70s. Was they started the Golden Triangle in Vietnam, and then they started the Golden Crescent in Afghanistan in 2001 and after. And so you're on the right track with that for sure.
So I say it's like the Ozarks, the show, the Ozarks on COVID-19. So here you have all these legitimate operations that are now shut down because of a lockdown, and you can't clean your money. So what you gonna do? Let's just burn it all up, right? And during my investigation, I asked, I wonder if most of the damage is along Lake Street, which happens to be was the highest percentage of crime, and where El Nuevo was ensconced. And sure enough, most of the damage was along Lake Street. And as Catherine Austin Fitts says, that's not a riot pattern. That's a real estate opportunity. And so again, multi-layered psyop. But if you can't clean your money, and people don't know this, but El Nuevo was outfitted with at least 16 cameras. And of course, then the evidence room, which was very close by, Precinct 3, burned down. I interviewed someone who lived in Minneapolis, who witnessed literally grenades being thrown into the evidence room and caught it. And then they deleted all of his evidence off of WeChat, and it scared the shit out of him. So there was evidence. There's people who did see what Walz, what Jacob Fry, the Justin Trudeau knockoff mayor, and other unsavory characters in the government. So I believe there's complicity. And this book, Mexican Cartel Don't Exist, is again this whole culture, drug pin culture, this folklore. The reason for the books and the movies and the songs is to further cement fallacies. Because I even looked, when I interviewed the DEA investigator, I wanted to ask him, so how does it work in the 20th century, 21st century? How does it, these do they work with black gangs? Do they work with the Bloods that are there? This is Bloodland. And so it's consciously decentralized, so that you can't track down the kingpins. And they bank on low-level drug dealers like Morries and arguably George. And there's talk about George's trucking license. So I asked myself, I wonder if Minneapolis to Texas is a drug corridor. Oh, look, I'm right. It's a drug corridor. And he has a trucking. So there was like talk about he didn't make the test, so he didn't have his license. But Maya Santa Maria also happens to have a trucking company, aside from having a lot of other companies, including a funeral company where it was found Vietnamese caskets. Why are you bringing in caskets from Vietnam, Maya? Maya, who in Spanish said he was a sacrificio, literalmente sacrificio. She actually corrects herself and adds the word literal, just like Nancy Pelosi was like, "Thank you, George, for sacrificing your life." So these you know, the Masonic, the 33s, which when I began this, was not versed, like, let's say, Sean Hibbeler, who he made Psychological Operation, which is was on George Floyd, focusing on the George Soros Masonic aspect. I didn't know anything about that. And so I was looking into it with a grain of salt. But sure enough, the amount of 33s, and it's like a signature. It's like, we were here. We were here. So there.
See the Bills game over the weekend?
Sure did. I mean, I didn't see the Bills game. I saw the collapse, but I don't watch football per se.
Oh, I'm talking about the week after with all the 33s.
Oh,
all
the 33s.
Over the place. Mm-hmm.
No, I saw images, and he was a 3, right, DeMar?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting that you brought up how would the CIA interface? Well, maybe not the CIA, but whatever. How would the shadow government interface with the Bloods and the Crips? Well, I mean, you have to know about Freeway Rick Ross and Gary Webb, and that Freeway Rick Ross had no idea he was working. Danilo Blandone was an informant for the CIA, that he was working with the CIA during he was working for the CIA through the Contras. He was trying to get the Contras back into power in El Salvador, right? Did you know about all that history?
No, I did not.
Good Lord! Oh, you're missing a whole chapter in your book. Yeah. No, this is exactly where it interfaces. So, Freeway Rick Ross gets busted. He's the biggest. He is the biggest drug dealer, crack cocaine. He was actually the first person to mass produce and mass sell crack cocaine, and his supplier Danilo Blandone was directly working with the DEA in America, but he was a representative of he was a part of the elite that his family was overthrown in El Salvador when the communists took over, and in El Salvador their bread and butter was all, of course, the CIA in South America in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Yeah. They were putting into power right-wing governments to just shore up business interests. This is an extension of 1954, the invasion of Guatemala, which was fucking genius. If you want to see a psyop perfectly executed, read something like Bitter Fruit. Guatemala, Arbenz getting overthrown in 1954 by the CIA. They overthrew that country with a dozen people, like for real. But yeah, so Freeway Rick Ross, one of the biggest drug dealers of all time, had no idea that his supplier was working for the CIA. And that came out in court, Gary Webb, and Gary Webb probably got suicided for this reason. Gary Webb wrote, he wrote this whole expose on the CIA, detailing this story about Freeway Rick Ross. And I'm sorry, we're getting away from George Floyd.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah. So he wrote for the Sacramento, the Mercury. The San Jose Mercury, and he did this expose, and he got run out of town. He was on the verge of basically winning a Pulitzer. The CIA, the Washington Post, the New York Times, they destroyed him, and he went on and he took his story and he expanded on it, and he did more interviews. He wrote Dark Alliance. This is one of the best books I have ever read. That's a definite must read, especially in this little in this corridor of the story. And
thank you.
Yeah.
I will say you're mentioning a lot Latin South America and the connection with Derek doing a stint at Fort Benning School of Americas, aka School of Assassins.
I had no fucking idea.
And nobody mentions this. And again, I bring all the receipts, but it was in 2004. And so he was technically working as an MPD cop. He had started in 2001, and he was also working at El Nuevo, so the story goes. And so what the fuck was he doing there? What you doing there? Why are you doing? What's your 4-month stint? He also was in the military. So, I could venture, was he...
he got pulled out.
MK Ultra? Was he trained as an assassin? And you could technically do a straight up hit because he knows the camera is there. He's looking straight at it. He's looking at Darnella straight ahead. And you brought up earlier also with Timothy Japhet and looking in the wrong places. They bank on red herrings and conspiracy theorists, except I'm a real journalist and I'm bringing receipts and I'm doing the work so that nobody can tell me that I'm a conspiracy theorist. So again, I made a movie consciously, very matter of fact. Yes, there's my commentary, and that I was told yesterday that it's sarcastic and therefore it might further endanger my life because I'm sarcastic. But I mean, it's my voice. I'm sarcastic. I don't justify anybody's death. I don't care if they're, I don't justify. I'm not even capital punishment. Someone might look and say, well, George was a very unsavory character. That's their, that's your opinion. Nonetheless, why did Derek continue to put his knee 2 minutes and 53 seconds after George was clearly passed out? Now, in the film and the book, I suggest or I hint to the possibility that this operation did not mean for George to die, because over and over again, I'm told, I don't think he's dead. I don't think he's dead. Well, do you have his autopsy pictures? Because I do, and he looks pretty fucking dead to me. Again, sure, you can perhaps do a Sleeping Beauty where you gave George something and he goes out and comes back. Also, I would also add that is it possible that there was something else in his system? I looked at the death, the way you die when you're poisoned by cyanide, and it's very similar to how he died. And one of the detectives in the federal trial that barely anyone covered or knew happened, it's like they go granular on the manual. And it's the police manual that's seemingly on the stand via proxy of these rookies. And also the fact that there's rookies, was this a training? Now, this is not in the movie and is in the book, but I have found also a training that happened or was slated to happen on May 29th, which is the day that they fantastically arrested Derek in lightning speed, because real investigations unfortunately take time. This, what I've conducted, is a real investigation. But yet, let's give a fucking Pulitzer Prize to Darnella and $700,000. Literally, fucking Meryl Streep thanked her, and Spike Lee gave her also a personal thank you for her Pulitzer Prize winning. And so when I looked into Darnella, so I looked on her Facebook page before it became, I also was witnessing in real time scrubbing stuff. Yep. So in 2019, March 21st, she posted a chocolate cake that says revolution on it. So I'm like, what's March 21st? Oh, it's a United Nations holiday to eradicate racism and xenophobia by the United Nations. So was this person primed? when the day before she's doing a Facebook Live and says, yeah, Corona was fun for a while, but I got to stack my money back up. And she sure did stack her money back up.
Oh, I actually just remembered too. It wasn't El Salvador, it was Nicaragua. I apologize.
School of Assassins was there too.
Yeah. Well, that was
Noriega.
Yep. That's where a lot of serious shit happened. And so, this is something I wanted to get into. How did you track down? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name. Is it Marcus? Morris. How did you track him down? Like, when he went to court, when he was doing his interviews, it seemed like he was very much, he played the game, did exactly what, he was supposed to say the whole time. He got all his cases scrubbed and stuff like that. How is he so willing to speak with you so candidly?
Does he know, does he know he's going to be in a documentary? No. Maurice. Yeah, I don't know why I really have a soft spot for Maurice. I want to say that they just imprisoned him for 5 years, and I sat on the Zoom call. And at the end of the Zoom call, I unmuted myself. The fucking judge who treated him like an unperson, like worse than Jen Psaki, just with such guilt. Because they trudged up, and I'll go back and I'll establish for the audience. Well, maybe I'll go back now. So Maurice escapes and flees town, goes to Houston, gets arrested as a fugitive out of state. On June 2nd, he is told that he's going to be a key witness. All the charges are dropped. The case is sealed. And he goes to a psychological, a psych house, thinking that that this is a new chapter in his life and that he's being given a second chance. He even tells Law and Crime Network he's going to write a book, but yet he doesn't even know how to spell George. And now I'm supposedly writing a book for him, and he doesn't know the extent, even though. So I'm looking at this and I'm like, the guy fucking cut a deal with the government. And I think he's a snitch. So I do a FOIA document, and Mimi's right. Mimi's my nickname. And so for a hot minute, he was a snitch, but he stopped responding to the cops. Now, is he still a snitch? I'm not sure. But as the trial approaches and they lie to him, there's no way he's going to be a key witness, because then the drugs are going to come to light, and we have to pretend that drugs weren't even a factor in this new rewrite. And then he's not going to plead the fifth, right, for Derek. So, I mean, he's not going to testify. So he pleads the fifth, and I got the FOIA document. There's a cell phone. I didn't know he was going to pick up, and he starts talking to me. He thinks I'm a Washington Post journalist, and he tries to sell me footage of him and George at Chuck E. Cheese. Just talk to your team. Yeah, I'll talk to my big team. Meanwhile, he has no idea that I'm also going through my own hell for my being outspoken against this jab from hell, and now dealing with this. So we started talking, and we struck up, I guess, was it a friendship? I told him, Maurice, that public defender, Adrienne Cousins, I called her, and I'm clairaudient, and I can scan someone's voice, and I'm intuitive, and I'm like, this woman's she works for the state. She doesn't care about you, Maurice. And he kind of brushed it off, and then he'd call me again. Okay, so leading up, Maurice, would you do an interview with me? And then he's like, Mimi, I'm going to go with you. After he disappeared, we spoke, and I asked him questions about my cover-up that I've discovered and is in the movie. I won't spoil it, and definitely in the book. And he disappears. And then he comes back, and he tells me that he got arrested, and they've trudged up all his old charges from 2019. And he goes, Mimi, I'm going to go with you. So you can go and check out on my Rumble. There's a 2-hour exclusive interview that I happened to do by the grace of God on the anniversary of George Floyd. So I feel like that's like God knows my heart, that I'm not driven. I'm not trying to monetize. I just want to know the fucking truth. And George taught me a lot. I didn't know a lot of stuff. He's really schooled me on a lot of things. Anyway, so I was speaking to someone who's kind of mentored me, Joel Gilbert, who really encouraged me and helped me suss out this cover up, helped me uncover it. And he told me, did you ever consider that maybe Maurice is getting in trouble because he's speaking to you? And so the day after our exclusive interview was the day that Maurice got arrested, got a warrant for his. So I don't know. And then I sussed out that he would get thrown in jail because he's a loose end, and I was right. And so here I am on the government hearing, the sentencing, where he's decided. He called me later and he's like, Mimi, you were right, I'm going pro se. So if you're familiar with pro se, they like to fuck with you. It's like, oh, you're not going to be in the system, we're going to have a field day with you. And I sat on the call, on the hearing, and his family is there. It's a Zoom call, but I could see Maurice. And at the very, very end, because I didn't want to add, after they sentenced him and the judge was umming, I just unmuted myself and I said, you guys all made excuses for George Floyd's career, his career criminal life and his addiction, but you don't care about this man's Black life. You're all fucking hypocrites. They closed down the whole Zoom call. I court bombed it. And so then I'm speaking to the mom, and I said, did you hear me? And she said, yeah, we had friends and families. Like, who was that lady? So Mimi, the B lady. So anyway, that's to answer regarding Maurice. CPS has taken his son away. They trudged up to 2019. The irony is that it was for choking his baby mama. And then I said to the mom, why doesn't the baby mama drop the charges? Oh, she tried, but the government didn't let her.
Yeah, they like to roll like that. I remember back when I was a kid, they used to try to throw my dad in jail when if he got behind on his child support. And my mother would go to court and be like, no, I would never have taken him to court, in the first place, had I known that you guys, like, I'll forgive him for what he owes. And they said, no, he doesn't owe you the money. He owes the state the money because the penalties rack up. And she's like, well, how am I going to get child support if he's in jail? Right. And that's how they roll, especially when CPS is involved, That is extra legal. That is outside of the bounds of regular ass law.
It breaks my heart. They've jabbed the kid. He's in jail. He called me yesterday and he's so chipper, and I don't understand. He's reading self-help books. Like, I remember early on, I'm like, that they said you have the beginnings of intellectual disability, which I had never heard that term before. And he's like, Mimi, does it look like I'm intellectually disabled to you? And I'm like, no, it sure doesn't. It sure doesn't. He's poetic and he does come across as very genuine. But he got the short end of the stick, and it seems that only, some Black lives matter.
It is strange, isn't it? I've never heard the beginnings of intellectual disability. Like, it would be one thing to say that he's on the spectrum, but it's strange to say. So what are they planning on, like, destroying his brain over time? Or is this some kind of weird, like, Robert, that, like, don't nobody go full retard? Like, what is...
Well, what I think is that he's thinking that he's doing a noble thing, and that this death has, like I said, cleared the slate for him. But what's really going on is that he's stigmatizing his own self by submitting himself into a mental institute, and also I didn't get clarity on who paid for it, because it's like $2,600 a month on the cheap program. And I asked him, did the government pay for? I asked his mom, did the government pay for him? So, we disagree, and I didn't get into that. I don't think that Derek killed him. But look, the thing that I've noticed is that people have their blind spots, right? They could be brilliant, but believe in something that you don't. They have a blind spot. And so if you are really a victim of racism or police brutality, and clearly, he told me, he goes, Mimi, in black and white, I read like a piece of shit. And I paused and I'm like, I know, Maurice, I thought you were a piece of shit. So the way in which the police documents are written up are favorable to the force. And so it's a lot of grays, a lot of shades of gray. And I believe people should get a second chance. I don't think that if you're addicted to drugs, but here we are, we made George a martyr and compared him to Jesus Christ, literally made him a modern Messiah. And nobody give a crap about this man's black life.
Yeah, I always thought it was a little sus that, okay, first of all, I want to know who the committee is that decided that in all of the streets where Black Lives Matter was going to be painted in the street, that they were going to use the same color and font. 1. 2, I want to know how they knew to do it only on the jacked up streets that they were never going to pave, like in West Roxbury down into the town next to Boston. That is one of the worst streets to drive on, the whole way to, and I'm like, they could have just fixed the road instead of painting Black Lives Matter on it. Maybe, and then there's trash all over the fucking place. Maybe they could get, more attention to waste management in the hood. Why don't we actually, that's the hypocrisy of it is probably what pisses me off the most, because you want to talk a big game about how much you care about black people, but I did not hear about one outreach program that went into lower income neighborhoods that would have benefited that community. I didn't hear about any seed money for businesses started in Dorchester. I didn't hear about, banks giving free loans to people in Detroit. I didn't hear none of that shit. All I saw was the only organization that was supposed to give a shit about black people steal $1 billion and then go and give it to, transgender organizations that are friendly to them and all that stuff. And that was actually the thing that I liked most about Candace Owens' documentary was when she went to that lady's house. She's like,
Teresa.
is this... Yeah.
Teresa Scott, who I've spoken to.
How did that go?
It's great. She told me to call anytime.
Are you being sarcastic again?
No.
Oh, okay.
She told me to call anytime. Look, I don't necessarily give my opinions, and I can say I'm a big enough person to be able to say I'm wrong, what I thought of Maurice. And look, he still might have been a snitch and got the short end of the stick. It just, the hypocrisy really gets to me too. And yesterday I only had 5 minutes. He called me. I signed up to JPay, which is it's like I sent him an email and he's like, this will take 2 stamps. What? It's a fucking email. What racket? Yes. What rackets are you guys running? You don't give a shit about these people. Mm-hmm. And so, after I spoke to him and I'm like, he's like, Mimi, we're going to still write a book. And I feel guilty because I don't know what he would think of my movie. I don't agree with him and I know that he can lie. He clearly, he's a criminal. He has a criminal, let's say he has a criminal mind, right? And I understand you have to preserve yourself and you do what you can. So again, a lot of shades of gray, but I felt bad. I felt bad, and for whatever reason, he and I connected, and like, you know, I remember when I lost track of him and he got arrested, and then I was like, where the fuck is this guy? And so I went on Facebook and I was messaging on Facebook, do you know where Maurice is? Is he back in jail? And I happened to reach out to a relative who put me in touch with his mom. And then he called me and I said, Maurice, I'm on my bike. I'm exercising. Can I call you? He goes, Mimi, you inspire me. I'm going to do some lunges. And he's like eating halal and was trying to take care of himself. So here you have a man that at least wants to try, you know, and I did tell him right. A lot of times he just did not acknowledge the drugs at all. And another time I said, you know, Maurice, those drugs are made by the Sinaloa, the Mexican cartel, and it's like playing Russian roulette. And he just got quiet and it's like, I didn't know. So I don't think that he purposely gave his bro some bad drugs, but so maybe some people in this operation didn't know and some people did. But as Candace also shows in her film, why doesn't the Floyd family ever pick up his personal belongings?
Right.
I asked Maurice's mom, did you meet the family at least at the funeral? And she's like, no, there were celebrities. I'm like, do you think that Shannon Tatum took it out of the goodness of his heart to go and stand up and go to this guy's funeral? Or yeah, everything's shut down, times are tough, I'm going to take this fucking gig and go and put a face diaper and stand beside Al Sharpton. So I said, yeah, these people they took money. And then I told Teresa, the roommate, and she's like, yeah, that's a good point. Because she didn't meet them at the funeral either. Oh, because of the celebrities. Okay. Disgusting. Fucking disgusting. Who is this Floyd family? It's almost like they cast all the Floyds. Let's find, it's like Joe Schmo.
Well, I have two opinions on this. One is, when you have, I'm not pretending to know the guy personally, but when you have someone like that in your family, you keep him at arm's distance, for 30 years. And secondly, people are at their this is the one thing I hate about humans, and maybe it's just this place and time, maybe it's America, maybe it's the way that we do inheritance and all that stuff, but people become real disgusting when family members die, and it pains my heart. And I have the board. Yeah, and I am going to make sure that if when I die, if everybody isn't in agreement and cool with what I'm doing, I am going to take out all my money and I'm going to burn it in the backyard. And I'm going to say, fuck you guys, fight over that.
By then there will be no money and you'll be happy.
I will burn my crypto wallet, whatever the fuck it is. I will spend it. I will spend it on chihuahuas and let them go in the middle of a very nice neighborhood just to make sure I'm pissing everybody off. I don't care.
Well, we've reached, levels of madness beyond, which I would argue is part of the design of the Rona regime. We've all lost friends and family. My dad worked for Pfizer and Procter & Gamble and J&J and was a mechanical engineer, retired, but he's not returning any of my calls. I don't think he liked my text message of because he's a big JC fan. And I said, do you think Jesus would wear a face diaper? So. Yeah. I don't think so.
This is definitely why we could talk for a long time, because I have a few thoughts on the way that people think about Jesus. And he would not approve any motherfuckers. But Maryam, I would like to wrap it up right there. You have been a fabulous guest. I am going to. I want everybody to go check out all the links in the show notes.
Yes.
You need to definitely support this woman and her work, just to at least get the money back on the FOIA request, for Christ's sake. But yes, Maryam, if there's anything you would like to let my audience know about you, or where they can find any of your work, anything like that, pitch it.
Thank you. I'd like to just say I understand that there's George Floyd fatigue, but that this was the event that ushered in the color revolution. And I would go as far as to say that they used this event to get more jabs into the arms of the number one vaccine hesitant community, which are the Blacks.
Actually, yes, that's it. And I fucking totally forgot to even get into color revolutions. You're going to have to come back on.
No, it's okay. We could talk, I could talk about George Floyd. People can buzz on over to MaryamHenein.com. I raised $1 million to make Vanishing of the Bees, and I've worked almost a year, and I haven't even met half of my measly goal of 15,000. So I like to say in her 6-week lifespan, a honeybee will only produce a 1/4 teaspoon of honey, so every little drop counts. Thank you.
Beautiful. All right, thank you, Maryam. Thanks a million times for coming on this show.
Thank you. Thank you.